Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last group of amazing presenters before the closing keynote. We have a super amazing treat for you guys. We have two wonderful, wonderful, amazing educators, Taylor Meredith and Jen Vincent, and they are here to tell us about conscious coaching and give us some really great strategies for us. Just to give you guys a little head info about them, Taylor Meredith has taught fifth grade in New York City and suburban Chicago. She currently works as an instructional coach in a K-5 building in Illinois. Jen Vincent is a tech integration specialist for Mundelein School District 75, a K-8 elementary district north of Chicago. They are both very active on Twitter and writing all over online, so you guys may have read a lot of their work. And I'm just going to go ahead and hand it off to them. If during the session you have a question or a thought or you love something that they say, which will probably happen a lot, please make sure to tweet and include the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering. It's actually on the bottom of my screen right now. And then also add their Twitter name to it. They won't have it on the bottom of their screen right now just because of a little tech glitch, but on their slides you should be able to find their Twitter handle. And in case you are already with your phone, it is @4feedback for Taylor Meredith. And for Jen, it is @JenVincentTeach, or you can also tweet @MentorText. All right, so I'm going to hand it off to them. Have fun, guys.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We appreciate the warm welcome, and we hope that everybody has been following along with all of the awesome webinars that we've had today. So yes, I am Jen Vincent, and we are going to introduce ourselves first. I'm so excited to be here with Taylor to talk about conscious coaching with you, and so I will let Taylor go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone, and we're so excited to be here. I was inspired this morning by the keynote, excuse me, and so I decided to introduce myself, creating a little bit of an identity map. So a little bit about me. I grew up here in Chicago, and then I went to college in New York and started my career there. I went to Syracuse. Let's go Orange. They're in the Final Four tonight. I was a member of the New York City Teaching Fellows, and I taught in East Harlem. I taught special education and fifth grade, which I loved. Then I moved back home to Chicago, where I also taught fifth grade in a suburb north of the city. And I am currently in my second year as an instructional coach for Deerfield District 109. I just wrote a few key words here to help you understand a little bit more about my life as an educator. I feel like it's been driven by curiosity, exploration, wild ideas, failure, and making everyone and everything feel important. So that's a little bit about me, and I will turn it back over to Jen so we can learn a little bit more about her.
Thank you. So I am Jen Vincent. I am currently a technology integration specialist in Mundelein Elementary School District 75, which is north of Chicago. I started my career in education as a special education teacher. I worked with kids who were deaf and hard of hearing, and after that I moved into supporting our teacher mentor program, and the district I worked in was U46 in Elgin in Illinois, which is humongous. So we had lots of new teachers, and the mentoring experience was really good for me because it helped me bridge from teaching to going into being a coach. So I've been working with technology integration for the last 3 years, but this is my first year working specifically in Mundelein.
Okay, like Catherine said, thank you for the introduction. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share with us, we want this to be an interactive session. So make sure you tweet using the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering, and you can tweet @4feedback, @MentorText, or @JenVincentTech.
Exactly. And so really we're here to talk about conscious coaching and what that means to us. So it's a little bit about why do we think this is important, and also why do we think the work of a coach is important. And it really comes down to making an impact on student learning through the coaching conversations that we have. But I want to tell you a little bit about how Taylor and I actually met and how we came to want to present together and share this with you. So it was last year when Taylor was like, hey Jen, we kind of live close to each other. We've never met before, but it would be really great if we could get together and chat and just talk about this coaching role and what it looks like. So that's what we did. We met at a Starbucks not too far from me, kind of in between where we live. And I got to talk to Taylor about the coaching experience, and I think that's when we realized that it's just different from teaching. You don't have your own classroom. You really are trying to impact others, and you're trying to make a difference in student learning by influencing other people. But sometimes it's hard because you're not in the classroom and you just can't do it yourself. So you're relying on other people to help you kind of feel like you're making a difference. And so we had a really, really great conversation about that. And Taylor can tell you a little bit more about how she felt after our conversation.
So just like Jen said, we kind of met to talk about the coaching role, and little did I know while we were having this conversation, Jen was weaving in some coaching questions for me, like asking about the things that I felt successful at and what I would do moving forward in my practice. And it really helped kind of bring some clarity to the coaching role. My first year out of the classroom, I felt very pulled in a lot of directions, and I didn't feel like I really had a focus. I knew my broad focus, but this really helped kind of clarify why I wanted to be a coach, why we do what we do, the effect that we can have on student impact, and refining practice and trying new things. So it was a very interesting conversation because I felt like I was being coached, and it kind of solidified the value of this role to me because I felt like I'd gotten so much out of it.
Awesome. And it makes me feel so good to hear that because it's not easy to ask those questions and be really thoughtful about how you're asking the questions, but that's the key, is asking questions so that the person that you're working with can actually come to their own ideas instead of just giving them ideas and feeding them ideas. I have a story about when my son, he was just starting to walk, my first son, and so I went to the doctor and I was like, does he need special shoes? Does he have to have like support on his shoes? They have these like slipper type shoes that kids wear now when they're first starting to walk, and I was worried about whether those were good enough for him to be in. And the doctor said, well, why do we wear shoes? I kind of was like taken aback, like, I don't know, I think we wear shoes to protect our feet, and I know there are shoes with, like, I just remember feeling like I don't know the answer, and I don't know the answer that he wanted me to have. So when I think about coaching and how I ask questions of people, I try to help them come to an answer and not ask the question so it sounds like there should already be an answer and I know the answer and you haven't figured it out yet. I try not to feel the way I felt that day in the doctor's office when he asked me, well, why don't you just do this, or why don't you try that? And so that's really what I was trying to do with Taylor, was to ask questions to help her think through what options she might have. And when I talk with teachers, we always start with students first, right? And what we want the students to be able to accomplish and what we want them to be able to do, and keeping that at the core of all of our conversations, and then thinking through ideas and options, and having the teachers really come to their decisions is one of the best things we can do as a coach.
And I agree with everything that Jen said, of course. I also think that one of the huge reasons that we want to focus on the why and making an impact on learning through these conversations is that these are also things that we wanted to model for our students. So one of a story that I have about working in my current school district is that I had 2 folders when I first started, and one folder was full of kind of teacher conversation things, and then I had one folder that was full of things that we're using to guide student conversations, and I realized that they kind of go together, that these coaching conversations that we have with teachers are also conversations that we can have with students, and through that we can help make an impact.
sorry. When I made the shift from being a teacher working with students to working as a coach, I had a friend who asked me about considering that idea of coming to work first with the mentor program, and then that led me into tech integration. And I remember being like, no, I can't leave my students. I remember clutching my heart and thinking, but my kids, I couldn't think about leaving them. And I really believe that if you're a coach and that's still the feeling that you have, then that's okay to still be a coach. Like, yes, you want to go back to teaching, but if you still have that strong sense of really loving to work with kids and wanting to make an impact for them, then being in a coaching role is great because we can have a larger impact. But we still have those kids close to our heart, and that is super, super important to remember. Because as we're talking to teachers, our decisions always have to be based off of what's best for students and how we're going to support them. So that's really our why, and I just want to kind of sum up here. We go back to our slides that talk about making an impact on student learning. So as a coach, it's definitely always about the students. To start with the students, keep the students in mind, always on your mind and always in your heart. Make decisions that work towards goals. When you're talking with teachers, thinking about decisions that work towards the goals that you have with the students. And Taylor and I will talk a little bit more about always being yourself and what that means to be yourself when you're coaching teachers. But when it comes to the impact on student learning, know, again, yourself and follow your heart with what you would do if it was your own practice. Okay, so we're going to move on now to talking about how do we really connect with teachers so that we can support the work with students that they're doing in classrooms. So Taylor's going to tell us a little bit more about starting to build relationships with staff.
Okay, so one of the first things is I was trying to kind of come up with some tools that could be good takeaways, and there's really only one tool that comes to mind, and is that your ears. Listening is so important when it comes to building relationships. I think as human beings, we want to be heard, we want to be seen, and that clearly, rings true here as well. I'd like to also connect this back to the keynote because that really resonated with me about being curious and being interested and noticing things. I think a lot of times, we are so immersed in what we're doing every day that kind of noticing things, whether it's something as little as, a haircut, or following up on knowing that somebody was taking their son to go look at colleges, whatever it is, notice, listen, and ask questions. I think that is the first thing to do, and I know that's something that works when you're building relationships with staff and students. I know that I taught in a different district and then became a coach in a different district, and so nobody in my new district in 109 knew me as a teacher, and I realized that I had to kind of listen, and I had to be present, and I had to be aware and show them that I could make connections with staff as well as with students for them to kind of get to know me. So I think the biggest tool in starting to build relationships with staff and students is your ears. Listening can go a long way.
Exactly. It really is about listening to them. So often teachers really want to be able to share what's going on in their practice and have someone that they can talk to. A lot of teaching is, on your own with the kids. And so having somebody who can listen and help you think through and ask those thoughtful questions and not just give them answers or tell them what to do is really powerful. So we have some ideas for how coaches might be able to ask questions that would encourage teachers to really think and maybe think a little bit more reflectively or differently about their practice. And some of those ideas are, when you ask a question, you might say something like, what are some ways that you might think about doing this? What are some ideas that you might have? So using the word some helps show that there's more than one idea, right? So there's not necessarily a right or a wrong or a my way or a your way, but there's multiple ideas. So trying to use that word some, just using plurals. So for example, some ideas versus what's an idea. Some ideas, some thoughts, some options, anything like that to make it plural, again, makes it sound like there's more than one way, that there's not just a right way or a wrong way, my way or your way. There are so many options, so that's another thing to do. And then using the word might. So we don't have to try this and you don't have to do it, but what are things that we might try? And again, that puts it out there as like, what are the options? What are things that we might try? And it takes away some of the it's going to work or it's not going to work, it's going to succeed or fail. It just makes it sound like, hey, what are some things that we could try? What are some ideas that we have? It feels more open. Going back to that conversation about with my doctor, it's not a right or a wrong. It's, hey, what are some ideas that we could think through? What are some reasons why? And to really help get that conversation going. Again, we are talking about conscious coaching and conversations that we're having. So it's not about a coach telling somebody what to do, but helping to really get their thinking going and process to think about what might happen next. One other thing that we wanted to share, going back to the idea of being yourself. So I actually have a story. We have a first grade team that they talked about elections and voting, and so they read a couple books about voting. They did this really cool blended tech where they had a computer. The kids went in and did a Google form and voted for the presidents, which are characters from books, and then they had this awesome cardboard voting booth, and the kids had to wait in line and come in and vote on the Google form, and they analyzed all the data. It was really cool. Well, the book President Squid just came out by Erin Reynolds, and I took it into one of the first grade teachers the other day, and I shared it with her, and she was like, oh, this is so cool. I said, I know you did that whole unit. This just came out. Maybe you want to read it and tie back into that and share that with students. And she was like, yeah, this is great. And I walked out realizing that I just went because I love books, right? So I had my love of books to share with her. That's just me and that's who I am. And making that connection with her, even though I'm a tech integration specialist, I wasn't going in to talk about technology. In that sense, I was going in to say, hey, I know you did this cool project. I'm going in to add another resource for you. And I don't know, I walked out feeling really good, but knowing that I'm making relationships by being myself and sharing myself with teachers. So that's another idea for making connections with teachers.
I think one of the phrases that I have used the most this year in starting these coaching conversations is, what if we? I feel like I tend to throw out, what if we tried this? What if this happened? And I think that's kind of led to some big thinking, because it's just throwing an idea out there. Some of the ideas actually end up coming to fruition and some of the ideas don't. But I think it gets that dialogue going and that comfort level of kind of being able to share not only small ideas but big ideas with one another. I think one of the things that I've also done to help build relationships with staff and students is, like Jen said, by being myself. And I am somebody that is fiercely curious, and I like knowing how things work, and I like trying new things. And so I think kind of showing teachers that I don't have all of the answers, but I'm willing to look for them with them or find things to explore with them, I think has been really important. I think sometimes in the coaching role, it's a lot of people kind of hear what we say, and I think it's really important for them to see what we do as well. So not just say, like, I don't have the answers, but to show them that I don't have the answers, and to show how I would go about finding the answers or what I would do with that. So I think it's about kind of modeling and showing who I am as a person, as somebody who wants to find answers and wants to look for things, and somebody that wants to go on that journey together. It's so much better to do that with a partner, with a team, with a group of students. So I think showing my willingness for that has been another way that I've been successful in building relationships both with staff and students.
And then one last thing before we move on to the next idea that we have is this idea of celebrating with staff. I think that's a really great way to build relationships. So yes, we always want to learn about people, we want to ask questions, but when it's time to be excited about something, you gotta be excited. So I would say stop right now, and whether you pause and then keep playing, listening to our thing, but think about what looks like for you. What does a celebration look like? Do you clap? Do you fist pump? Do you bump? Do you high five? Whatever it is it a woohoo? Like, what does it look like? I know I'm a hugger, and sometimes I have to not hug people, so I do air high fives sometimes with people who are like, I'm not, like, don't touch me. Okay, air high five, you did it, a thumbs up. Maybe it's cheesy. I am known for being like the cheese factor in my my partner and I, my other technology integration person, like I'm more of the cheesier person. So I'm like, cheese it up, get people super excited. I think if you are excited for them, then they feel excited and they feel like they're doing something good. They're happy to be part of that collaboration with you, and it really makes a difference in making those connections with others. So Taylor, do you have a celebration? What do you do?
So I'm probably like your coaching partner. I'm not very huggy or anything like that, but one thing I've noticed is one way that I celebrate with kind of individuals and teams is I've noticed that as teachers we tend to kind of talk about at the end of the day like all of the things that didn't go the way we thought they would go. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is walk through the hallways and ask teachers and kind of shout out one thing that went well. And I know a team that I worked with started doing this last year, and they just kind of gathered in a circle and took 5 minutes to just say one thing that worked really well. And I think that's kind of been one way that I've celebrated it by literally shouting out what they've done that's worked. And that's just kind of something that's worked for me. Like Jen said, it kind of takes a while to figure out what works for you, but it has to feel natural and it has to feel authentic, because you don't want to think that you don't want anybody else to feel uncomfortable. And if I'm doing something that makes me feel uncomfortable, it'll make other people feel awkward too. So yeah, literally shouting out. I'm also a big fan of the air high five, a little shoulder action, never heard it either.
You are so funny. That's awesome. Okay, so building relationships, some of our ideas were to be open to listening and asking questions, be yourself. Like Taylor said, the more natural you can be, the more it feels natural to you, the less awkward you're going to feel, and the less awkward the people that you're working with are going to feel. Just being thoughtful about how you ask questions, maybe using some or plurals or might or what if, because it definitely sounds like, let's try it. What's the worst that could happen? And just finding your own celebration and feeding off of others and helping teachers to celebrate. And actually celebration ties into our next topic, because I think it's really an important part of the growth mindset is celebrating when you, celebrating when you feel like you really do try something and it works out. So growth mindset, moving on to growth mindset here. We wanted to share what it looks like to embrace, model, and foster growth mindset as a coach, and how we celebrate the big and the small when we are coaching.
So one of, I think, the most challenging things for me moving into a coaching role was that it is a little bit more difficult to kind of see student growth every day. As a teacher, you see the students for however many hours a day, however many days a week, and you can see their growth from day to day. And as a coach, sometimes I'll be working in a classroom and I won't be able to get into that classroom for another 5 days or another 7 days or whatever it is. And while I hear all of the wonderful things that the teachers are doing, it can be very hard not to be able to see student impact every day, or student growth, I should say, every day. So one of the things that I've started to do to kind of help my own mindset as a coach is I've just started to be a little bit more present in the building. So with students that I work with on a consistent basis, or classrooms that I work with on a consistent basis, I make sure that I'm in the hallways during arrival, I'm in the hallways during dismissal, I pop in during lunch, and I can ask these students questions. I can see what they're reading. I can comment on something that they're working on in math that I know that maybe has been a challenge for them. We can have kind of momentary celebrations in the hallway together. They can share something that they're struggling with. I tend to be a big cheerleader when people tell me something is difficult. So there's a student that's really working on her multiplication tables, and when she tells me that she started something new and it was really hard, that's kind of a moment that I cheer for her, and I say, that's great. I'm so excited that you're working on something that's so challenging for you. And kind of checking in that way, I think has been, it's a small thing every day. I mean, it's 10 minutes out of my day that I'm in the hallways, but it has made a huge impact on my mindset on being able to see student growth. And I think it's made an impact on the students as well, knowing that when they walk through the hallway, they may see an adult that they don't get to see every day, but will ask like, oh, did you finish that book that you started a couple weeks ago? So that's one of the ways that I think that's helped me transition to this coaching role.
And I think going back to being yourself and knowing yourself, think about what fills your bucket. So we know, like, if we have the students close to our heart, then maybe connecting with the students, whether it's a daily basis or however you decide to check in, connecting with students is definitely a way to know that and feel like you're still making a difference. Maybe you start a project. Maybe you think, hey, I've got this really cool project. I'm going to go approach some teachers and see if they want to participate with me. Just find your own autonomy. Find something that you can definitely make an impact on. I work with we have a coach nearby, in a district nearby, who shared how when you're in a coaching role, you have rocks and you have seeds. When you think about your teachers, there are some who are more hesitant to change your rocks, and then you have other people who are really, really ready to grow and flourish from working with a coach. And so as a coach, do you spend your time more on the rocks or more on the people who are the seeds who you can really help to grow? I think as a coach, it's important to work with both. But how much time do you spend on each of those different types of teachers that you're working with? And maybe if you're feeling kind of like, I really need to feel some energy and excitement about my coaching, maybe go reach out to those people who are really, really willing to work with you and connect and grow. And so those might be the people that you spend some time with for a little bit. I have a story about a teacher who I recently shared gamification with. We went to the technology conference in our state last month, and when we came back, we were sharing some resources, and I said how I went to this session on gamification, actually led by Carrie Bauckham. She's heck awesome on Twitter. That's her real Twitter handle, is heck awesome. So she presented and shared gamification and it looked like in her classroom, and I'd heard of it before, and I didn't know much about it, so that's why I went to the presentation. So I'm listening to Carrie talk, and I was starting to grasp it a little bit more and understand it. And we went back and we shared, and I said, I went to this really cool presentation, like it was really cool, but I've never done gamification before. Well, after our meeting, a teacher came up and said, that sounds awesome, I totally want to do gamification. Like I said, I had never done gamification before, so I'm like, okay, growth mindset for me and for her. Let's try, let's figure it out. We asked Carrie to do a Google Hangout with us, and so she actually talked to the teacher and helped to give her some ideas. The teacher talked to the students and got ideas from them. They ended up going with a Pac-Man theme, and they have like a whole Pac-Man board, and the kids are on with different teams, and they have to move, and it's just really, really cool, and it's been really, really awesome to see. But I think in terms of growth mindset, when she said, like, I want to do that, like, even though it wasn't comfortable to me, I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's try to figure it out. And I supported her by helping to try to find some resources that might be helpful and asking her questions to help her think through what it would look like in her classroom and how it would actually come to life. She was like super motivated to do it, so it was awesome and exciting to see what that looks like. Just this week, she was telling me a little bit about how it's going, and I tweeted Carrie, and Carrie was like, that's amazing. And my teacher happens to not be on Twitter. She's like, maybe next year I'll try Twitter. But I sent her an email to say, look, I tweeted about the work that you're doing because I think it's really cool. And Carrie wrote back to you and said, that's awesome, I'm so excited. Keep me posted, tell me more. And the teacher wrote back and said, you'll never believe it, and she was explaining even more about what she's noticed from her students, how they're motivated, how they're working harder, how they're working together to even get things done. So it's really cool. But that's an example of having a growth mindset both as a coach when you might not know what the teacher wants to learn and explore about, and then also helping the teacher to know that, yeah, you're going to celebrate with them if they have something that they're trying out for the first time or doing something that's different. And then going back to that celebration, like, how do you get excited for them? How do you help them be excited and help them realize that they are stretching and growing? And I think that celebration ties into that really, really well.
I agree, and I have just one more thing to add. I think one of the other things that helps kind of foster growth mindset is this kind of will tie into our next piece talking about reflection, is just asking for feedback from teachers and showing them that you are still a work in progress and you're trying to make sure that you are helping them and their students in the best way you can. When I first started coaching, I would send a lot of emails because I thought that was just the easiest thing to send an email where a teacher could save it and look at it later, until finally I asked a few teachers that I work with, like, is that helpful? And they said, no. Like, you know, sometimes we don't have time to read the emails, or we really want to, you know, respond right away, but we can't because we have kids in the room. And just getting that little piece of feedback, I didn't feel upset about it. I was relieved because now I know that I can just pop into their classroom, and if they don't have kids, I can talk to them about whatever it is that we need. So I think making sure that you are also sharing with teachers, like, you are growing in your role as a coach. You never have become a coach and that's it. Like, you always have more to learn, more to work on, more ways to develop. So I think kind of sharing that with teachers and asking them for feedback is really important moving forward.
Okay, so in terms of the growth mindset, here are some ideas we talked about. We talked about taking risks and sharing outcomes, and for us to be excited about taking risks and telling teachers about that, but then also celebrating with them. We talked about celebrating and being enthusiastic and excited about them, and ideas that our teachers have, so that we can kind of go along with them and support them, and ultimately being yourself and finding your way, finding what feels natural to be able to celebrate with teachers and to encourage them to keep going. And as Taylor said, this whole idea of we're all works in progress, right? As the teachers are, as much as we are, and so it's really important to think about. So we're on to our last topic of discussion here when it comes to coaching, and that is reflection. Taylor introduced it a little bit, and how reflection is so important both in the conversations that we have with teachers, but also in our lives as coaching. It is super, super important. And I'm just going to share, let's see, I think I can show you an example of a form that I share with teachers after I've met with them. So Taylor will talk about like her coaching model and how she works with teachers, but I have a partner, her name is Patience Bertana, and so we work together. The two of us support 3 buildings in our district. And at the beginning of the year, we sat down and we decided we wanted to have like a consistent way for working with teachers and information to share with teachers after we were done, and also some record keeping for ourselves so we know what we've done and what we have to do next. So we use a Google form. We created a Google form where we enter in information. So we'll say like our name, the teacher's name, the topic of the conversation, and then we start with what's working, like kind of what is the situation right now, and then what's the challenge, or what do we want to change, or what do we want to do differently. And that's where we ask all the questions and try to talk to the teachers, and maybe we share some options or we research for them and come up with ideas. And then we always have the teacher's next steps and the tech integration's next step, so the coach's next steps. And that's really nice because it's kind of a way to recap, okay, here's the conversation, we're leaving it at this is what you're going to do next, this is what I'm going to do next, and then we have a plan going forward. And we usually have a time to meet again, or sometimes we'll say, okay, I don't think we need to meet again, but I'll check in with you. So it just kind of depends on what the conversation is about. So we do that on a Google form, and then I run, I think it's an extension or an add-on that's called Autocrat. So Autocrat then, it takes all the information that I submit into my Google form and it sends it directly to a Google document that I created. So I'm going to try to show that to you now so you can see it. Okay, so what you see, hold on, what you should see now. Okay, so this is this is just a blank form, but you can see how it has the teacher's information at the top, and then it has the 4 squares that shows what's working, what are our challenges, concerns, teacher's next step, and then the tech integration's next step. So that is really nice because then I can go back and refer to that to see what are we going to do next, where are we at. It's nice to just be able to check in with them and see, well, this is what we did last time, this is where we were going next. We have this nice reflection piece. So that's really great as a way to, first of all, we have a reflection at the end of our conversation, but then it's also a chance for me to go back and say, okay, how's it going? How did it go? What happened? And then we have a plan for a touchback so that we can think about what we're going to do next. So Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about your coaching model now?
Yes. So one of the things I wanted to share was last year when I started in the coaching role, I became very focused on trying different types of coaching models. All of these coaching models are wonderful. Diane Sweeney, Jim Knight, following these things. And it was very difficult for me because I felt like I was following a formula that didn't necessarily feel right to me. So my coaching partner and I have kind of come up with our own coaching model that takes ideas that we've borrowed from, our favorite thinkers. And our model is rooted a lot in listening and asking questions like we've talked about. Teachers can request to work with us via Google form, but we found that we get most of our conversations started, in the morning before school or at lunch or during plan times when people stop by. It's very kind of fluid and natural. We use very simple ways to kind of document with teachers what we've been working on, just more of an accountability for us so that we can show that we're going to follow up on whatever next steps we talked about. We use very kind of simple feedback and like recording strategies. We use a lot of what I used as a classroom teacher, and I used a lot of heart and brain feedback. So the heart feedback is the things that make me feel really good that I saw or that I noticed, and brain feedback is something to think about or something to consider or something that you might want to try. None of it is, judgmental at all. It's just ideas and observations that are based on what we've seen students doing. So we try to keep all of that student focused. We've used some versions of kid watching forms that we have adapted from Christine Mraz and Mindset for Learning, which we love. We use a lot of those notes to kind of close read together with teachers so that we can look at kind of trends and patterns and then decide what our next steps are together. And usually, like Jen said, we try to kind of outline teachers' next steps and our next steps and when we will be checking in again. Also, as a note to kind of reflect, as a classroom teacher myself, I would always get a little disappointed if a colleague or a supervisor or someone would come into my room and then they would leave without giving me any feedback, whether it was just for a check-in or to come and grab my stapler. If you're in my room, you've probably heard something, you've probably seen something. And so I've kind of made it a point to try and not pop into a classroom and leave with nothing. So either I'll send a reflective email like, oh, I noticed your students were all so engaged because their eyes were on the board and they were leaning in and couldn't wait to hear what you were going to say next, or a note, or just to stop by and say, oh, I've noticed the student that, had been struggling with writing had pages and pages of words in front of them. I can't believe it. That was great. Awesome job. So, as a reflective piece, I've tried to make sure that every time I'm in a classroom, I offer some sort of feedback or some observation, just so that teachers know that I care about every interaction that we have, not just the coaching conversations.
Oh, that's really, really important. Super, super important. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Taylor. I have one more thing to share. Well, two more things actually to share, and then we're pretty much done here. One thing I wanted to share is, if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram at all, you know that we have a new puppy that we adopted in November, and we've gone to training classes with her. And as we've been doing it, it's hard. It is hard to train a puppy and to get her to do what you need her to do. And our trainer's really awesome. She does a lot of she's a psychology major. She understands everything about behavior. And so I notice after a while, she'll say to me, how does it feel? When we do something well, she finally gets it, Purdy's walking with me, or she's doing what I'm asking her to do. And I feel this oh, it's okay, it's working. And she'll say like, how does that feel? And so I started to do that with teachers. So like with my teacher who tried gamification, she was telling me all about it. I'm like, how do you feel about it? Like I've been starting to do that. And I think it's kind of neat because it's just a way of like, how does that feel? And then they can be like, yeah, it feels good. Like I'm doing this. And then they usually go into some kind of a reflection piece. So Taylor, maybe that's part of one of your brain things and I just don't even realize it. But so yeah, so how are you feel? How does it feel like, to be doing it and to be in the middle of it, and how's it going? And the other thing I was going to share is anytime you go over notes, so like Taylor and I both keep notes, and just when you are reflecting, think about the evidence and not so much about how it feels. I mean, it's important to think about how you feel, but remember in the end that to look at the evidence and think about the impact that you're making, because sometimes you don't feel like you're doing enough. Going back to when you're teaching and you have your own students, you can really see the impact right there. And as a coach, you don't always feel that, but if you look at the evidence, you look at how many times you've met with teacher, you look at all the notes you've taken, you look at what they've accomplished and how it's been to work with students, then I think you can help feel like more solidified in the work that you're doing, because you do notice that you're making a difference. The evidence is there, even though you don't always feel it. And when you look at the evidence, then hopefully you feel it a little bit more strongly. Okay, so that's our presentation. So let me just very quickly recap this last part that we had here about reflection. So reflection really is super important. Don't forget to reflect. Maybe ask how people are feeling. Talk about the next time. So when you reflect, start to think forward about what the next plans are that you're going to have. When you are reflecting, look at your thoughts and your feelings, but also the notes, and focus on the evidence. And ultimately remember that baby steps do count. Sometimes it feels like we're not making as big a difference as we did when we were teaching, but we have hopefully a broader impact. And that's really, really awesome to be able to do as a coach. So thank you so much for joining us. Taylor and I are so happy that you came and listened to our ideas. If you have any questions, you can find us on Twitter, as we said before, at MentorTex or at Jen Vincent. You can find Taylor at For Feedback on Twitter. And then we have, we just wanted to share that if you can make it, it would be awesome if you can go and watch the closing, and that will be on at 3 o'clock. It is Kate Roberts and Maggie Beatty Roberts, and they are absolutely fantastic, and they will be talking about the right tool for the job, which is practical planning to bring big ideas to life. And we are so excited to hear them. So if you, thank you. We just want to say thank you. Taylor, do you have some last words that you want to say, or just thank you to everybody for joining us?
Thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you, Educator Collaborative. This was such an awesome day of learning already, and we still have a little bit more with Kate and Maggie, and it's just been so great to be part of. And we hope that we hear from you guys and that we can keep this conversation going.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.